All right, good evening, everyone, and welcome to another common session for our Synoikis Herodotus course. We are moving on to book 6 and common session for our Synoikis Herodotus course. We are moving on to book 6 and
Lindsay
common
Samson
session
will
for our
be
Synoikis Herodotus course.
presenting
We
to
are
us.
moving on
Sorry,
to
I've
book
got a
6
echo
and
here.
common session for our Synoikis.
Sorry, that was my technical difficulty. I was putting the YouTube link out and left it open. All right, learning every day. Now, my friend and colleague, Lindsay Samson, is going to introduce book 6 to us. And Lindsay, take it away.
Okay, it's nice to be part of the group. This is usually a bad time for me, so I've kind of been stalking the class and watching some and reading some of the Slack, but not, it's been all asynchronous, so it's nice to be in sync with some people this evening. So I wanted to talk about 3 main things about book 6. I want to talk about these morally ambiguous heroes that come up in book 6 and that have been coming up throughout, but there are 3 really that pop up in book 6. There's a lot. We finally get to Marathon, right, of the 3 main battles in the Persian War. We finally get our first big win for the Greeks, Marathon. And so I want to talk a little bit about the military successes and failures, and then spend a few minutes talking about the topic of women in Herodotus. I saw on Tuesday that you all were talking that this topic came up some, and it has come up some in the Slack channels or in your Slack groups. So I thought it was something that we could sort of look at together, and hopefully those of you who are watching can comment on Slack a little bit and give a little bit of input about the women. But we'll save that for last, saving the best for last, of course. So these morally ambiguous heroes, as we move into book 6, we finish up the Ionian Revolt. We've sort of learned some about these characters. I'm going to talk briefly about Histiaeus, Miltiades, and Cleomenes. We've seen Histiaeus pop up in book 5 as well. He actually, Histiaeus and Miltiades, these 2 characters are interesting. They work with Darius. They go on campaign with him in Scythia. So Histiaeus seems like he's pro-Persian, right? He seems to be a pro-Persian, what's the word I'm looking for? Governor or satrap. He's trying to gain power through the Persians. So he does work with Darius and hangs out with Darius. Darius actually likes him quite a bit. But in the beginning of book 6, we see a different side of Histiaeus, where all of a sudden Herodotus does this interesting thing where he introduces Histiaeus as the impetus for the Ionian Revolt. This whole time it's been Histiaeus. You know, Aristagoras was only inspired by Histiaeus. He wasn't the main figure and the main mover behind the revolt. It was Histiaeus. So that's kind of an interesting turn that it takes, because we've been, in book 5, we've been looking a lot at Aristagoras. So Histiaeus, although he's working with Darius, we also kind of like him a little bit, because then he breaks away from Darius and does his thing where he leads part of the revolt and the end of the revolt. But even though he does this and he betrays Darius, Darius still kind of has affection for him, which I think is interesting. So he kind of, you know, it's not really clear if he's a good guy or a bad guy. We see this also with Miltiades, who I mentioned was with Darius on campaign in Scythia. I believe that came up in book 4. He's an interesting character. So he does work with the Persians as well. He was a tyrant on the Kyrenesus, and so he was an Athenian. He was not very welcome at Athens when he returned, because the Athenians had by this time adopted democracy and were not really excited about a tyrant coming back to town. So Miltiades, however, proved himself to the Athenians that he was not your typical tyrant, and he won the position of a general. And so when it's time to go to Marathon, Miltiades is one of the 10 generals, and he persuades that the 10 generals have to agree on how they're going to move forward with whatever situation it is that they're in. Well, they're split right down the middle as to whether or not to fight at Marathon. And Miltiades convinces the swing vote, Callimachus, that they should fight. So he's kind of, and he is also the one that leads the troops and comes up with the battle plan that is successful at Marathon. So he does work with Darius. He is a tyrant, but at the same time, he seems like he might be a good guy, a good general, and true to Athens. In fact, his win at Marathon makes him so popular with the Athenians that he just says, hey, I need 70 ships, and I'm going to go out and do my thing. And he doesn't really give a lot of explanation as to what he's going to do or how he's going to, how he's going to proceed with all of these ships. But they love him so much for his win at Marathon that they give him the 70 ships, and he goes to Paros to try to take that island. And he is not successful. He is injured. Which I'm going to talk more about this situation later, but he's injured and in his thigh, and he ends up dying of that wound. It becomes gangrenous and he dies from that wound. But his expedition to Paros was not a great military move. It was not a good idea, and he didn't execute it correctly. And in fact, he kind of turns out to be a coward, which is very interesting. And if you look at how he behaved at Marathon, it's just a completely different character. So these heroes that we're getting of the Persian War are very morally questionable at times, but they have these moments of greatness, right? They have these moments where they just shine through. And this also comes through, it seems to be true for the Greeks as well in the Peloponnesian War, where you have these sort of interesting, complicated men who don't always make great decisions, but then they have these moments of greatness. And Herodotus seems to highlight that. The last one I was going to talk about is Cleomenes, who we also met in Book 5 with his daughter Gorgo, right, who says, you better stop listening to this man or he will corrupt you. So Cleomenes he actually goes pretty far and meddles with some oracles. So he has people falsely report some oracles so that he can get rid of his competition in Book 6. And that's a big no-no. And he also is reportedly, Herodotus tells us about a situation where he kills a bunch of soldiers in a sanctuary. And these are the two reasons why he ends up going mad in Book 6 and killing himself in a rather gruesome way. So he has these sort of demons in his past, right? But Cleomenes also is responsible for helping Athens with Aegina, right? Aegina and Athens have this very rocky relationship that you all talked about the week before last, right? And how it's sort of setting everybody up for the Peloponnesian War. And so Aegina goes pro-Persian. And that's a big problem for Athens and for Sparta, because they can be a Persian naval base now 25 miles off the coast of Athens. It's not a very comfortable situation for them. So Cleomenes comes in and saves the day and gets rid of the pro-Persian party that's taken over Aegina at this time. So he does help the cause. and he has these, again, these moments of greatness where he does what needs to be done, and he does it for all of Greece. But then he also has these moments with this infighting. There's a lot of infighting in book 6, I think you'll see, of Greeks working against Greeks. And it's not just Greeks against Greeks, it's Spartans against Spartans, or it's Aegeans versus Aegeans. So, or Athenians versus Athenians. There's a lot of infighting within the city. So we start to begin to see that it's not about this unified identity of Greece, or even a unified identity of Athenian or of Spartan. It is about these small clans that are fighting against each other and working against each other, that occasionally, when they come together and work together, they can do great things, but they have to overcome a lot to do that. They fight a lot. So those are the 3 characters that I thought were particularly interesting from this book. And ones that you might want to watch out for. Maybe think about ideas of, you know, what a hero should look like, or what do heroes in Herodotus look like in this book in particular. I also wanted to briefly mention these military successes and failures. There are 3 main military events in this book. There's the battle at Lade, which is off a little island off of Miletus, right? We've talked about Miletus and how the Persians would really like to keep Miletus, but so the Persians stage a battle off the coast of this island because they can't get into Miletus. And then there is, of course, the battle at Marathon, which is the big battle, right? That puts Athens on the map. And then there is Miltiades going out against Paros. So in the battle at Lade, again, we have this Greeks against Greeks things. And we also have this continuation of the idea of Ionians being weak somehow, or just this sort of disdain that Herodotus seems to have for the Ionians, and that they're not real strong, manly Greeks, you know. So at Lade, Dionysius is a general that starts to train the sailors how to properly fight in this very specific maneuver in naval battle. And he trains them hard every day. From dawn till dusk, they are working, and they are exhausted, and they get so frustrated by all of this hard training that the Ionians quit, and they refuse to train, and they refuse to do what they've been asked to do. And then the Persians come, and then several of the Ionians, led by the Samians, just leave the battle. They abandon the battle. They run away. They're cast as cowardly. But again, the feeling that I get, and it'll be interesting to see what you guys think about this too, about how Herodotus, his attitude toward it is kind of like, oh, there goes those Ionians again, just, abandoning the cause and giving in to the Persians, and, not wanting to do the hard work and the sacrifice that's required to fight off this Persian threat. So he has this great quote where he says, what happened after that, he's talking about in the heat of the battle, I cannot say with real exactitude as to which of the Ionians, sorry, I lost my place, as to which of the Ionians proved cowards or which good men, for they kept accusing one another. So again, they're fighting against each other. It's not clear who ran away and who stayed. Most of the Samians ran away. Those from Lesbos ran away. Some of the Samians stayed, and some of the Chians stayed. So it's, again, they're all fighting against each other and accusing each other. And it seems to be that the unity of Greece is a real problem. But when they manage that unity, like they do at Marathon with the Athenians and the Plataeans working together, they do great things, right? They have these great moments. And Marathon, those who were at Marathon was an extremely long, bloody, hard battle. And those who are at Marathon and who survived sort of had this special status in Greece, and well, you know, particularly in Athens, and they were called the Marathonomachoi, and they were given a special status in Athens, those who had survived this battle, because it was so fierce and it was so intimidating. I mean, you have thousands of Persians against, you know, a few hundred Greeks. There are some issues with the battle. If you're interested in battle tactics, it's not quite clear why the Persian cavalry showed up late, but they did, and that kind of saved the Greeks. It allowed the Greeks to move, so they made their middle weak and then the flanks strong. And so when the Persians broke through the middle lane, they kind of closed in on them like that. But if the cavalry had been there, then the cavalry would have come around the back. They did show up, but they were late to the party. So that really saved the Greeks. So it was a huge military success. Miltiades led the way. The Plataeans show up. Spartans can't make it because they have a religious festival, so they once again have stayed out of it. But the Athenians join with the Plataeans and really surprisingly defeat the Persians. I think they were probably surprised more than anybody else. So there is that successful moment in book 6. I think you'll see with that is a nice comparison with what we've seen with the Ionian Revolt, and a lot of losing battles and not being coordinated and not working together. And then I did want to talk briefly too about Miltiades going out to Paros, simply because it leads into this idea of women in Herodotus, because Miltiades goes to Paros and he can't seem to take the city. And this woman who is a captive, she's also a priestess, she tells him that he needs to go to the temple of Demeter the lawgiver and perform some kind of rite or do something. We don't know what it is. All we know is that Miltiades goes there and he gets spooked by something and runs away. And so he doesn't get to take Paros. So this woman, Timo, then what's interesting is that the Parians want to execute her for helping Miltiades. And so they asked the oracle, they asked the Pythia, can we execute her? Because she's a priestess, right? So she has some clout, she has some weight behind her. And the Pythia says, no, it's not her fault. So that's something interesting that we don't usually see a lot in Herodotus, is where women are usually, I mean, often blamed for things going poorly, as we've seen, you know, with Atossa. But there's also Herodotus, much like the heroes that we were talking about in book 6, Herodotus does present a complicated picture of women. So can some of you, if you're on the Slack, maybe jump in and think about the women that we've seen so far in Herodotus, and what roles do they play in their stories? Do they behave with the same sense of right and wrong, or is that a cultural difference? And and how does that culture affect their interactions with men? So there's a few of them. He starts out the book with women, right? He starts out the histories with that first woman, Io, right? And all of these women being stolen is the cause of the war. Okay, I'm going to look on here. Let's see. So I'll give you guys a few minutes to think about that.
Hi, this is one of the students from Southwestern. We actually wanted to chime in with an example from book 6 that we saw. I believe it's in reference to the Lacedaemonians when he's speaking kind of on a tangent, and he's talking about how there are these two individuals. One is married to the most beautiful girl, I guess, around, and the other is a king that wants to marry this particular lady, and so he, basically establishes an oath with him that says, you can have any possession you want of mine, and I'll have any possession you want, or I want of yours. And he chooses as his possession the young wife, and the husband of the wife protests, but then it says that basically he capitulated because of the trickery or the cleverness of this scheme. But the implicit, I think, kind of maybe cultural takeaway was that the woman was seen as a possession.
Yeah, no, that's a very good point. Women were seen as possessions. They were property that could be traded and stolen. I mean, that was the real issue that Herodotus brings up, I think, in the beginning of the histories too, with Io and Europa and Medea and Helen. It's not that these are women and people that are being stolen. It's that you're stealing my property. Like, my wife is my property and you're stealing her. And you need to return her. You need to return my property in the condition that you found it if you want, to not have war with us, right? So, I mean, yeah, women throughout are often seen as property. Sometimes I think about Candale's wife, who was treated as property by her husband and who fought against that, right? And who refused to be treated that way. Tomiris, also from book 1, she's one of my personal favorites. Whose husband died and who Cyrus was trying to gain her land by marrying her, right? So it's like she is the proxy she is property, but he also gains all of the things that come with her, which is the rule of the Massagetai. So yeah, that's a good point. Come up in, I had forgotten that comes up in book 6. It does. Yeah. Are there any others that have popped up on Slack?
There is a mention of the Amazon women in book 3.
Yeah.
Have that the comment about the way he talked about them in the story made it seem like they had more power than the men in the culture. And they negotiated with men from another culture to make sure a deal benefited them. Is one comment. And I don't know, Lindsay, you can say more about this, but they're the exception, right? That proves the rule in some sense, but I'll let you.
Well, the Amazon certainly, I mean, that situation, what's interesting and what I've looked at, and if you're interested in pursuing this topic further, the first scholar to look at is Carolyn DeWald, Dewald. She is the primary, she's the basic seminal scholar for women in Herodotus. She actually differentiates between women who act as individuals and women who act as groups. So the Amazonians acting as a group, actually their behavior as a group falls into the normal sort of behavior of women as a group who uphold sort of social norms. Which they kind of do, but her point, what she talks about with the Amazons, is that the Amazons work with the men. So it's not just that women are the only ones that can uphold social norms, but that they have to do it with the men, especially in groups like that. But yeah, the Amazons, they do have, it's not that the sense that I got was not that they have more power than the men, although, in some ways they do in their culture, but that they negotiate to where they have, they meet in the middle, like culturally, the Amazonians meet in the middle with the men, that they settle down. I can't remember. what they were called. Yeah, it makes me think of the song "You Don't Own Me." Let's see. Athenian women killed the sole survivor of a battle using their brooches. Once again, it's women acting as a group to uphold the this mores of society. The daughter in book 4 who built her own pyramid, or the stepdaughter who managed to avoid being killed by her captor. They do have small and clever roles, and I wanted to bring this up, not only because it's a topic that I work on a little, but also it's a topic that runs throughout, and that it might be missed if we don't pick it up here and there. And also, we have some really interesting women coming up in books 7 and 8. Amestris and Artemisia are definitely women to watch in these books. They are powerful. Artemisia in particular is an interesting character because she comes from Halicarnassus, which is where Herodotus comes from. So he kind of has a special place in his heart for her, and gives her a lot of accolades. But we've also seen a lot of women, that I think are important to talk about as far as what are they doing in society, and just looking at women as individuals. We also have the queen. So Spartan women could be a whole book on Spartan women and Herodotus. Gorgo, the little girl, is fascinating. She makes an appearance in the last book of the histories as well as a grown woman. She is once again very clever and sort of checks the Spartans and shows them how to navigate a certain situation. I don't want to spoil it for you. It's a fun one. And then so she comes up, and then that Queen of Sparta, there's a Queen of Sparta in book 6 that comes up, who actually is the reason why they have a dual kingship, because she refuses to say which of her children came first. So she says, well, they'll just both be king, because she has twins. So she doesn't really trick them, but she is the driving force behind, or the explanation why they have a dual kingship. And there is also in book 6, there's a long digression about Spartan kingship and how that happened, and how they are like the Egyptians in a weird sort of comparison. That comes up. It's fun in book 6 as well. So I think to think about women in Herodotus is to look at a very complicated picture, which is not something that we normally see in ancient writings. We have evil queens like a Tossa, who give bad advice, and the Egyptian, I'm going to forget her name, the Egyptian queen who drowned all of the people that were involved in killing her brother. We have these sort of tragic, evil women of power, but then we have these very valiant women of power like Tamiris and Artemisia and Candale's wife, and even Polycrates' daughter, who makes sacrifices to try to save her father. So it's just something I think we should look out for, and something that something that we'll continue to see throughout the rest of the histories. I see we're at 7:30, so I will stop and see if there's any questions. I'm happy to talk about this further on Slack, or via email, whatever works best for you guys. But thanks for letting me talk about book 6 and participate synchronously with everyone. Thanks.
Great. Thank you very much, Dr. Samson. Lindsay has been very instrumental in helping us shape this course. So I'm very happy that you guys were able to meet her online, or see her face on camera, and like she said, she'll be happy to talk to you more about things in the Slack channel or by email. And she gave you some great tips for things to watch out for. Characters, your morally ambiguous characters, some big battles to watch for, and then watching for that thread of how women are portrayed. All good suggestions. So some of you have appointments with your teams on Slack right now, so be brainstorming ideas for what to write about, and we will meet back on Tuesday. Thank you, everyone, and have a great night.
Thanks, Gwen.